In every corner of the ancient world, from the golden sands of Egypt to the snow-capped peaks of the Himalayas, civilizations carved maps, not of their geography, but of their soul's journey after death. They built temples, scrolls, and monuments not merely to honor the dead, but to prepare for what came next. To them, death wasn't the end. It was a transition, a crossing into a realm more real, more consequential than this one. And yet, in our modern world, we fear it. We hide from it. We pretend it's unknowable. Why? Because the system benefits from your ignorance. If you don't know where you're going, you're easier to control while you're here. The Egyptians gave us the Book of the Dead, not as mythology, but as instruction, a literal guidebook for the soul navigating the Duat, the underworld. In it, the soul faces 42 judges, confronts its deeds, speaks sacred passwords, and journeys toward the Hall of Ma'at. Each challenge, each gate, corresponds not to fantasy, but to archetypes encoded in consciousness. In Tibet, the Bardo Thodol, or Tibetan Book of the Dead, describes a similar process. After death, the soul enters a liminal state, the Bardo, where it encounters visions, lights, and beings. Some terrifying, some divine. The text warns, these visions are projections of your own mind. If you recognize them as such, you transcend. If you react with fear, you fall back into the cycle. Different cultures, different languages, but the same blueprint. Why is that? Because truth leaves fingerprints. Because the soul's path, like gravity, isn't subjective, it's structural. But here's the part that was buried. These maps weren't just about what happens after death, they were clues for how to live before it. Because every step of that afterlife journey is mirrored in the inner world. The gatekeepers, your shadow traits, the demons, your suppressed traumas, the paradise beyond, your awakened self. You weren't just meant to die consciously, you were meant to live consciously so you could die consciously. And that's what the ancients knew, and what modern systems tried to erase. Imagine for a moment that your life is not a straight line but a loop, one that repeats because you never learn how to exit it. The ancient maps of the afterlife weren't just poetic myths, they were emergency instructions for breaking that loop. The Egyptians spoke of Ka, Ba, and Ach, aspects of the soul that had to be integrated to achieve immortality. The Ka is your life force, the Ba your personality, and the Ach your divine spark. Only when these align through conscious deeds, ritual, and awareness can the soul navigate the underworld without getting trapped in it. But what does that mean for us today? It means this life is not a test, it's a training ground. Every hardship, every fear, every suppressed truth, these aren't punishments, they're lessons, because the same obstacles you'll face in death are the ones you avoided in life. Tibetan teachings take this further. They describe Chikai Bardo, the moment of death where the clear light appears. If the soul recognizes it, it merges with the infinite. But if it's overwhelmed, if it clings to identity, memory, ego, it tumbles down into Sidpa Bardo, where karmic illusions reassemble a new life, a new prison. Do you see what this means? You're not trapped because the universe is cruel. You're trapped because you keep forgetting who you are. These sacred maps weren't drawn for fun. They were encoded in metaphor, symbols, and stories because language can't fully capture the journey. They warned us, the soul doesn't die, it transitions, and if unprepared, it repeats. But somewhere along the way, this wisdom was hidden. Churches turned death into sin. Science turned it into silence. Schools never spoke of it, so we stopped preparing, we started fearing, and fear is the lock. These ancient cultures weren't obsessed with death, they were obsessed with freedom, and they understood that death is not the opposite of life, it's the test of it. So when you hear of judges, scales, realms, and rebirths, don't dismiss them as old stories. See them for what they are, a mirror, a roadmap, a warning. Now picture this. What if all the myths you've heard, crossing the river Styx, facing Anubis with the scales, walking through the Tibetan Bardo realms, weren't symbolic at all? What if they were literal representations of something real, something seen and recorded by souls who came back? In the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the soul faces 42 judges. Each judge represents a principle, a moral, a vibration of being. The soul must declare, "I have not lied, I have not killed, I have not stolen." But here's what's never said out loud. These aren't confessions to gods. They're confrontations with your own essence, the you that you hid from yourself. Your frequency can't lie. The afterlife reads vibration, not vocabulary. The weighing of the heart against the feather of Ma'at isn't a metaphor. It's a measure of resonance. If your heart is burdened with guilt, deceit, regret, it sinks. If you've lived in alignment with truth, with purpose, it floats. This is physics disguised as myth. The Mayans told of Xibalba, an underworld filled with trials that tested the soul's courage, memory, and will. The soul had to pass through each one not just to survive, but to transform. The trials weren't punishment, they were purification. In every ancient map, the same structure repeats. A moment of separation, a journey through realms. Confrontation with the self, either return or transcendence. It echoes the hero's journey in mythology, but with stakes that transcend story. Because you're not just playing a role, you are the hero, and the journey is real. So what happens if you pass? What lies beyond the test? The Tibetans speak of the clear light where duality dissolves. The Egyptians describe union with Osiris, becoming one with the divine. The Greeks imagine the Elysian fields, not a place of indulgence, but of completion, of closure, not reward, but return. Return to your original frequency, your soul's undistorted tone. But if you fail the test, if you cling, resist, fear, you start over. Not as punishment, but as repetition. Because the universe doesn't judge, it teaches, which means this life, right now, is the practice run. The real exam comes when your body lets go, when no more distractions are left, when you stand in front of your own soul and have to answer a single question. If this resonates, you're not here by accident. Hit subscribe and follow the rest of this ancient map, because the journey beyond death is just beginning. Your soul remembers. Now let's help your mind catch up. There's a reason why these ancient maps weren't just spiritual poetry, they were survival guides for the soul. In Egypt, the Book of the Dead wasn't a bedtime story, it was a manual, a coded text designed to prepare the soul for the gauntlet of the afterlife. The weighing of the heart wasn't metaphor, it was instruction. Every choice you made, every thought, every emotion, it imprinted your energetic field. And in the realm beyond, that frequency determined where you would be drawn. Tibetan Buddhists had their own version, the Bardo Thodol, a guide read aloud to the dying, helping them navigate the intermediate state, the Bardo, between death and rebirth. It warned of illusions, of deceptive lights and beings that weren't what they appeared to be, and it taught the soul to recognize its true nature in the chaos. If you could remain conscious, aware, and unattached, you could escape the cycle entirely. But the warnings weren't just about wandering spirits or trials, they were about systems, mechanisms. The idea that the afterlife, too, has its architecture, structures, traps, choices. And here's where things get uncomfortable. Some of these maps suggest that what lies after death isn't all love and light, that there are forces, energetic, perhaps even conscious, that steer souls back into the loop, back into forgetting. Reincarnation not as a blessing, but as a containment strategy. What if being reborn isn't always a choice? What if it's a reset imposed on an awareness not yet awakened? Ancient texts often speak of a light appearing at the moment of death, but not all advise going into it. Some warn the first light isn't always the real one, that the soul, disoriented and untrained, can be pulled by instinct toward familiar frequencies, toward comfort or fear. And if the soul isn't aware, it defaults, just like in waking life. So the maps emphasize preparation, training the consciousness to stay lucid, not only in dreams, but in death, to resist reaction, to observe and then choose. Because that moment, the space between lives, is the most powerful window a soul ever gets. It's the software update before the next incarnation. And if you don't take control of it, something or someone else will. And maybe that's the whole point of this series, not to scare, not to preach, but to remind. You are not just a passenger in this journey, you are the navigator. And the ancient maps, they're not just stories, they're instructions you were never supposed to find. But let's go even deeper, beyond the metaphors and mysticism, into the possibility that ancient cultures weren't just speaking spiritually, but technologically. Because what if the afterlife isn't a vague ether of floating spirits, but a structured, multi-layered system? A system with gates, frequencies, memory locks, and administrators. Ancient Egyptian texts speak of gatekeepers. The Tibetan Bardo warns of beings who mimic divine presence. The Gnostics warned of archons, entities that feed off unconscious souls and push them back into the cycle of reincarnation before they awaken. This isn't just mythology. These are cross-cultural, time-transcending warnings about the same system, described with different symbols. So what exactly are they warning us about? Maybe that we're not dying into freedom, we're dying into an interface, one we've never been taught how to use, one designed to wipe memory, repurpose energy, and reroute consciousness into another loop, another lesson, another life where we forget again unless you start to remember. In that in-between space, you're not just drifting, you're in a decision matrix. The signals you follow, the emotions you hold, the identity you cling to, they decide what you see and where you go. Fear pulls you down, clarity lifts you out, and neutrality opens the door. This is why the ancient maps all taught the same thing in different ways. Self-awareness is the key. Recognition, detachment. They weren't obsessed with morality, they were obsessed with lucidity. Can you remain aware when everything is shifting? Can you see through illusion when it feels so real? That's the real test, not after death, but at death. It's not about being perfect, it's about being present. And maybe that's why these teachings were buried, burned, or reframed as superstition. Because a lucid soul is dangerous. It can't be recycled, it can't be farmed, it can't be led into another lifetime of distraction. So ask yourself, if death is a doorway, what determines where it leads? And more importantly, who's holding the map? So let's pull it all together. Across Egypt, Tibet, Sumer, and even indigenous oral traditions, there's a thread, a whispered legacy. They didn't speak of death as an end. They mapped it, studied it, prepared for it like one would a great journey, not with fear but with strategy. And maybe that's what we've forgotten, because in the modern world, death is taboo, sanitized, outsourced. We talk about it in hushed tones, if at all. But in doing so, we've lost one of the most vital teachings, that death is the mirror of life, that the way you live, the clarity you cultivate, the self you remember, those are the tools you carry when the body dissolves. And without them, you wander, you react, you get pulled toward familiar frequencies, karmic echoes, emotional residue. You wake up in a new life wondering why everything feels so heavy, so familiar, so scripted. But now something has shifted. You've seen the maps, you've heard the warnings, you're no longer walking blind. And in that awareness, something powerful awakens, the ability to choose, to question, to refuse unconscious re-entry into the same loop. Because this life, right now, is the launch pad. This is where lucidity is built, not in temples, not in final moments, but in every moment, in how you respond, in what you remember, in how deeply you choose to see. And the ancient ones, they never said the journey was easy, they said it was sacred. So the question isn't just what happens after we die. The real question is, what are you doing before you die to shape what comes next? Because in the next episode, we confront a truth that few dare to examine. What if reincarnation isn't just a choice, but a trap? And if it is, what's the way out? Stay lucid, stay with us. The real awakening has just begun.